Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grand Cruise Astrology. My name is Clayton Cruz, and let's talk about Jupiter going into the sign of Taurus. Now, I did another video about this, and I wanted to update that. I wanted to do a little revision, just because Jupiter is going to be making an aspect to Venus here later in the year, and it's important and it's worth mentioning. Um, so yeah, let's get to it. So Jupiter going into the sign of Taurus. Now, Jupiter, as soon as it goes into Taurus, which it has gone into Taurus in the middle of May, it is very quickly by May 21st, which is the day that I'm recording this video, is going to go into square with Mars, which in and of itself, not such a bad thing. Mars goes into the sign of Leo. So you have a fixed square from Leo to Taurus. Now, fixed squares are typically more difficult than mutable squares or cardinal squares because there's some stubbornness here with both parties typically, and it can cause a lot of tension because the impulse for creativity that a square more or less demands through some kind of conflict or crisis, can be a little more difficult to bring into form. It just there's more stubbornness, there's more inertia here, and so typically Jupiter and Mars, they typically do well together. They're like brothers that like to wrestle around in the dirt and work things out that way, and it's usually pretty harmless. In this case, still, I'm not too concerned about that, but it is a little bit more friction than otherwise would be with the square between these two. Um, but that's not the main piece with this. And I did another video about this because we have the opposition from Pluto and Aquarius, and so just right up front here with Jupiter being at the center of this T square between, and running intermediary between Pluto and Mars, it immediately puts Jupiter in, I want to say compromised position, but it very quickly shows the more challenging side of Jupiter in Taurus, and it can show the attributes of Taurus that are a little more that are less beneficial, like being dug in, being stubborn and immovable, right? So this is in play right from the beginning. The good news about this is that for the most part of Jupiter being in the sign of Taurus, it's going to be in really good shape because it's going to be making really nice aspects to the outer planets for the majority of the time, save this first week or so here, with Jupiter going into Taurus and making a square to Pluto. But for the most part during this transit, it's going to be in good shape. And even with the square to Pluto, um, it's it's only a square by sign, right? It's not a square by degree. So, um, no, I'm sorry, it's square by degree. It's not a square by sign. So, it gives it a little less punch as far as the friction is concerned from that Pluto aspect, but it's still there by degree and it's still in play. So, there is a little bit of a hiccup here with Jupiter going right into Taurus, and we're getting like an immediate, oh, what happened? Okay, what is this? What are we dealing with here? And so, that's pretty much Mars driven, Mars going into opposition with Pluto driven. But that'll be the only time that Jupiter makes a challenging aspect to an outer planet. In fact, once it gets toward the end of Taurus, it'll be making a nice aspect to Pluto. So once we get into next year, and along the way, we'll be making nice aspects to the outer planets. Now, it is going to be making a conjunction to Uranus, and so conjunctions are typically neither good nor bad. They're just an emphasis, the two planets coming together and creating more than the sum of their two parts. And so, usually to give it qualitative meaning, we look to the aspects surrounding the conjunction and what signs they're in and everything. And so, um, you know, I I'm seeing it as actually pretty beneficial because if you look at the time period when this conjunction happens, which is spring of 2024, if I remember correctly, that's going to be, yeah, April, right around April 2024. You look at the aspects they're in, it's not making any challenging aspects to the outer planets, and Saturn will be in nice position relative to Jupiter, Mars as well, um, and so for the most part, that this is looking really positive in relation to aspects of the planets. Jupiter does fine in the sign of Taurus, and so that's not an issue, and it just so long as by this time next spring, in relation to Jupiter being in the sign of Taurus and Uranus, which has already been in the sign of Taurus, when they come together, it's I think it's really going to be an opportunity to emphasize the positive of Uranus and Taurus, because Uranus and Taurus, uh, you know, just by definition is challenging in and of itself. It's not the easiest place for a planet like Uranus, because Uranus is about sudden change. It's about liberation and moving very, very quickly, very suddenly. It's revolutionary, um, and this is our own personal liberation and bringing a higher sense of you know liberation and freedom and individuality and novelty within our own life. And when it's in the sign of Taurus, which can be very dug in and solid and stable, but also kind of stuck in its ways at times, right? These energies can be difficult, and we can have a fixed Earth coming together with Uranus, which can feel like an earthquake, right? And so, we've had Uranus in Taurus since 2018, so we've been dealing with this energy for a while. But when Jupiter goes over Uranus and Taurus, it can create it can add some optimism. It can add some expansion to this quality, and the Uranian energy can get very energized and electrified, and the Uranian energy can, um, it can really take hold. But instead of it being earthquakes that knock all the buildings down, it can just be, we can all just be, electrified and supercharged instead, right? We can look at the more positive aspects of this. It can also bring in a lot of newness and innovation as far as how we order and how we organize our material life, and work our magic through that arena. Okay, so that's what Jupiter and conjunct Uranus can offer us there for that time period. Now, when we look at, now we'll just look at Jupiter in the sign of Taurus. What does it mean? Well, Jupiter in Taurus is about, Taurus is fixed Earth. It has a lot to do with physicality, 3 dimensions. Has a lot to do with our bodies. Okay. It has a lot to do with taking care of ourselves and attending to ourselves, attending to the things we need, but the things we also want. Okay. And so there can be a lot of indulgence with Jupiter in the sign of Taurus. There can be a lot of saying, you know what, to hell with it. I really like eating cake. Let's live a little bit, right? Or I want to have a glass of wine, or I want to, go to the spa. Whatever it is, this is about physical indulgence. With Jupiter in the sign of Taurus, and it's always, a caveat with Jupiter, to temper it with a little bit of measure and mean, so we don't have regrets in hindsight. But with Jupiter, it kind of gives us some perspective on being in the physical. That says, you know what, like life is short. We have these bodies. Let's make the most of that experience, and let's not pass it up, right? So that's that Jupiter and Taurus energy there. Um, good food, good sex, shopping. This is Taurus stuff, right? Because it's very much in the material, but it's also in the physical. Okay, so that's Jupiter and Taurus. It's great time. Jupiter is a planet of learning and higher learning and growth and education and just experience. And so like learning to cook, great time to really take that on if that's an interest. This aspect is really putting the wind at your back. If you want to try out new recipes and gourmet meals and things like that in the kitchen, this is a great energy for that. Yeah, it's also going to be a good time to make renovations around the house and fortify your structures in life and things that are solid, that are fixed earth, right? And Jupiter's going to bring you know the optimism, the will, the vision, and potentially the resources to make things happen in that department. So that's good. Yeah, Jupiter and Taurus. It's a nice energy. It's overall it's an energy of pleasure, right? And I think we're going to just feel a little bit more connected to our values and our value systems and our valuables, and appreciating that which we have and wanting to add to that in whatever ways we can. This is about accumulation. So this is nice. Now, the one thing I want to mention, I didn't mention in the last video, is that we do have Venus later in the year going retrograde. This will be in late July. Is that when it starts? Yeah, Venus starts to go retrograde in late July. It's going to hit square position to Jupiter, right around mid-August. So, and then it'll be, when it goes direct again, it'll be, yeah, it'll into September as well. So, I only mention this because, for the most part, Jupiter's making really nice aspects, except for this right here at the beginning. It's got a little speed bump. And then, it's going to run into Uranus next year. And I don't see that as being problematic. But, this Jupiter aspect, this Venus aspect, Venus going retrograde and making a square aspect to Jupiter, that can be a little bit more of the challenging side of Jupiter coming to play in one-to-one connections and relationships. With Venus going retrograde in the sign of Leo, this can be about ego running up against values. This can be about our perhaps pride and one-to-one connection coming into a contrast or friction with our personal value systems. Something along these lines here. Given that it's Jupiter, a lot of this can be, especially when Leo is involved with, Venus going retrograde in Leo. There can be a certain amount of pomp and pride that is in place here that can really distort the reality, and we can really blow things out of proportion. I was going to say monsters out of molehills, make mountains out of molehills, kind of thing here with that energy. So that's where Jupiter is potentially going to get a little bit overblown here. Once we get in August and September, it can just magnify some some issues because, typically when, typically with Venus, its energy is it's not typically a game-changing kind of energy. It usually, when it does square up to a planet like say Jupiter, it's, for a day or two, and then, things can maybe get blown out of proportion for a minute, and then it passes. But with it going retrograde, its energy is more pronounced. We notice it more. Venus is more in the spotlight, which actually isn't really a place where Venus likes to be. Venus doesn't really like to be the centerpiece, but it will be there from late July into September. And so, it's going to be a time going into square with Jupiter where, some things can get, ego can get a little bit overblown in one-to-one connections. And, or conversely, we could be so attached to our value systems and our values and our valuables and our possessions, our belongings, that we don't want to make necessary changes in relationships to account for somebody else. That's another way it could work too. So these are Venus Jupiter things that are coming into friction here later in the year, and I'll probably do another video about that as we get closer. But I just wanted to mention that just to say that it's not all roses with Jupiter. There are some challenges here this year, but for the most part, this is a lot of fun. This energy is a lot of fun. It's really an opportunity to enjoy the pleasures of life, eating, drinking, love, community, and being around the home, and just indulging a little bit, and really appreciating any excess that we have. Okay, so that's what I got. Hope this was helpful, and I'll see you on the next video.